Welcome to another episode of Alter Life. It's Dr. Ben here, and today we're getting physical. We have been kind of all over the place in the realm of mind and consciousness, and that's, of course, the general direction that I'm looking forward to taking in this podcast. However, we're getting back to the physical today. We're talking about detox, and this episode is intended to be a little mini masterclass supporting you in understanding the physical requirements to support optimal detoxification pathways in your body. And this conversation is super relevant for a number of reasons. First of all, we're in this toxic world and toxin accumulation is inevitable. And secondly, it's getting to be springtime. And I always associate spring with nature's detoxification season. There's new life, new energy, and that just inspires freshness in our bodies as well. So we can tune into these cycles of nature, shifts in nature, and kind of lean into that detoxifying energy. And also, this conversation is relevant because we're gearing up for our final Alter Health cleanse. Maybe some of you listeners out there have tuned in and been a part of one of our 22 prior cleanses. And you may have heard also that there are big shifts with Alter Health, the kind of professional, clinical, if you will, practice that I am involved with, and also Dr. Susanna, but she's stepping back. I don't need to get into the details, but long story short, we're hosting our final Alter Health Spring Cleanse starting in a few weeks on April 25th. So if this sort of information is inspiring to you and resonating to you, and you want to, join a supportive community of people all supporting our bodies in this sort of way, you can find more information at www.alter.health/cleanse, and it's just $49. So anyways, let's get into today's episode. Oh, but before we do, I also wanted to point out that we're getting physical today, but this is the first of a 3-part series. And in the next part, we're going to be talking more about the nervous system requirements for cleansing and detoxification and how important that is. And then in the third and final episode associated with this little series here, we're going to be talking about consciousness and mind and its role in cleansing as well. So yes, today is just purely physical and physiologic, but super duper important. So without further ado, let's get into today's quote of the day. If detoxification isn't supported, accumulation is inevitable. And this is, I don't know if this is attributed to anyone. I think this kind of just came out of a textbook of sorts. And this is just a fundamental truth of natural medicine, functional medicine, whatever have you, or life in general. As we'll get into, our bodies, especially in our world today, like I already alluded to, tend to accumulate. And we do have this innate detoxification process, that's programmed into us. And frankly, I've heard a lot of people, generally more conventional minded, who kind of poo-poo cleanses or detoxes as being some fad or trend. And it's like, oh, you don't need to do that because your body like naturally does that. And that is 100% true. However, in today's day and age, most people are living out of alignment in sort of a way that allows toxins to accumulate more quickly and overburden the system so that they are not released and excreted. And as we'll talk about in more detail, the accumulation of toxins and the overflowing of toxins in our body is what causes, in many cases, the expression of symptoms, physiologic. So those symptoms are just our body's attempt to detoxify and come back into balance, like we've talked about in the past in prior episodes on this podcast. So I thought this quote was pretty relevant. If detoxification isn't supported, accumulation is inevitable. So let's talk about rule number 1 of detoxification that, frankly, I don't hear a lot of people talking about. Again, a lot of people are just kind of like, take this supplement, take this thing, and drink this, or eat this, or don't eat that, or do a water cleanse, or whatever it might be. But the first and most important thing is more intended to be more sustainable. So rule number one of detoxification is to stop bringing toxins into your body. And it's like, okay, well, that's common sense. And the sad truth is that despite this being common sense, it's not common practice. Most people are living in a toxic environment. I mean, we are all on Earth and we are all exposed to the environmental toxins that are in many cases ubiquitous, whether it be in the food that we're choosing, or the pesticides or herbicides that are used to grow our whole foods, or whether it be in the air that we're breathing, from aerosolized compounds from industrialization, or cloud seeding, or chemtrails, or whatever you want to call it. Also, of course, toxicity that's in the water supply that most people are drinking if they're not choosing to drink purified or filtered water of some sort. So toxins are ubiquitous. So our first rule of detoxification is to understand the potential burden that we are exposed to and live in a way that helps us to mitigate our exposure. And just some examples. I already kind of shared the big ones. The main way that we ingest toxins are through food, air, and water, things that come into our mouth. And I think a lot of people focus most clearly on cleaning up food, and that's great. However, you drink water and you breathe air probably more than you're eating food. And sometimes that can be the biggest source of toxicity, again, depending on your unique circumstances and living environment. But I would just want to share some more details and kind of, plant some seeds to help you kind of think about how you can mitigate your toxic load in your own unique environment. So when it comes to food, I do recommend eating organic food, of course. And if I'm not fully organic, then choosing at least your, avoiding the dirty dozen, which is, most people are familiar with the list of dirty dozen produce items that are announced each year, that the most heavily laden with pesticides and herbicides. However, these are just produce items. So when it comes to whole grains and legumes, and also for those who eat meat, those especially when we're talking about meat and animal products, those foods tend to bioaccumulate toxicity. So it's even more important to be really diligent with sourcing clean, organic food, right? And and it goes without saying that we should for sure be looking at the ingredient list. And I'm really happy to see this becoming much more of a mainstream conversation. All of the dyes and preservatives and chemicals and flavor enhancers that are in packaged and processed foods. And it's like, we shouldn't be putting these things in our body. So when you are eating packaged foods, because some packaged foods are healthy, or healthier than others at least, you want to look at the ingredient list. Don't worry about the nutrition facts, but look at what's actually in that packaged food. So that's a little note about food. Of course, we've recorded dozens and dozens of conversations that delve into food and food quality and nutritional stuff, and we're not going to get into the weeds there. But when it comes to air, another source of potential toxicity, it's important to know that the best air quality we can get is outside. Of course, if we are spending most of our waking hours inside, then we can do some things to mitigate the indoor air quality. The first one being to consider an air filter of some sort. But what I actually like more than air filters is nature's air filters, which are plants. Surround yourself with some house plants. There's different plants that have been studied to remove toxins from the air. And, I think I know snake plants and spider plants do that. And those two plants just so happen to be super low maintenance and easy to avoid killing, which I have to admit that I'm not the greenest thumb, or don't have the greenest thumb. But in any event, houseplants are a great way to purify your indoor air environment. But also, just look at the household cleaners that you're using and avoid spraying toxins on all the surfaces and using toxic air fresheners and see these sort of things that, like I said, are becoming more mainstream awareness and common sense. And so just don't do that, right? Now let's talk about for a minute about water. And each one of these things, we could go like half hour, an hour, just diving into the weeds. And I feel like I'm already kind of getting lost in the weeds. But, air and water quality are super important. And when it comes to water, drinking filtered water, super important, depending on what comes out of your water faucet when you open the faucet at your home. Some people are on a well, some people are on, city water that's treated with lots of chemicals and fluoridation and chlorination and these sorts of things. So we at least want to get out of some of the easiest toxins that are, so just kind of like a gravity filter is great. A charcoal-based filter is great. Reverse osmosis is great. But we have to also consider the proper mineralization of the water. Again, a whole nother deep, deep topic. But long story short, we do want to not be drinking chemicals and all sorts of junk, that microplastics and all sorts of junk that might otherwise be in our water. So filter your water, drink spring water, ideally, these sorts of things. I already kind of talked about like the cleaning products and the household products, and also the things that we're lathering on our skin. All these things that we're exposed to can accumulate and burden our body. But the last kind of subject to cover in this, avoiding detoxification or avoiding toxins conversation is the electromagnetic frequency toxicity that many of us are also ubiquitously exposed to. So the EMFs can disharmonize your electromagnetic energy field. And the way to combat this, like, yes, we can do our best to mitigate EMF exposure. I think that's kind of a lost cause. And that's honestly not my personal main focus. My personal focus is just being outside more often, and specifically being outside, grounded, feet on the earth, because my understanding and my feeling is that when I do that, I'm essentially cleansing in a moment all of the disharmonious EMFs that I would otherwise be exposed to. It's kind of like a discharge of electromagnetic energy and coming into resonance with earth, which is bringing my body into its natural resonance state. So all that being said, we're never going to be perfect with this. It's no use to stress about this for sure. We're going to be talking, of course, about the effects of stressful thinking when it comes to detoxification in our body and essentially blocking the detox processes. But all that being said, knowledge is power, right? And the good news is that we can, when we do mitigate our exposure to toxicity in our environment, we do have this innate detoxification pathway that is supporting us in cleansing and clearing all the time. So that brings us to talk about your body kind of being like a bucket, because your body is like a bucket. You're kind of bringing all these things in, and I actually have a little slide to share here. You are bringing all these things in your bucket, but before we talk about the things coming in, we've got to talk about how your bucket is designed. Your bucket is brilliantly designed with holes at the bottom of the bucket. And these holes are your emunctories, which we're going to be talking about next. These are your bowels, your kidneys, your lungs, and your skin. And like I said, things are flowing through this bucket and things are coming in the bucket. And the things that are coming in the bucket are environmental toxins and drugs and alcohol, including prescription drugs, pharmaceutical products, processed foods, and really tens of thousands of chemicals that we are, again, ubiquitously exposed to in food, air, and water, primarily. So yes, good news is that we let these things flow through our bucket. We have in the bucket, I like to envision that's where our liver is, breaking things down and solubilizing things and keeping things flowing. And obviously, if you consider that, we are a fluid environment, hydration is super important in the flow of stuff through this bucket and allowing things to flow out through the emunctories. But as you can imagine, the emunctories can become overwhelmed. Your bowels might be constipated, kidney function starts to diminish if you're dehydrated, these sorts of things. And your toxin exposure tends to accumulate, especially as you live on Earth more and more years. And at some point, this bucket overflows. And this overflow of the bucket is or can be seen as the expression of symptoms by your body. Again, this is not a problem. This is just information telling you that you are overburdened. And ideally, information and messaging telling you, hey, connect with nature. Hey, support natural detoxification processes. Hey, nourish yourself. Hey, hydrate. Hey, ground your body. Relax. These sorts of things. So this brings us to talk about the liver, which is, of course, the main detoxification organ in the body. Oh yeah, so the goal here is to excrete toxins faster than they accumulate, but sometimes we can't do that. And the good news is we've got this liver, and the liver, most people think about the liver equals detoxification. Like that's the primary role of the liver. And maybe you could say that is the primary function, but it's important to also know that the liver has hundreds of other functions, and detoxification is just one of hundreds of functions that the liver is doing all of the time to keep us alive. And I always like to think of the liver being named liver because it lives us. It keeps us alive, and we cannot live without the liver. And of course, we can't live without any of the vital organs, but this liver is so important. And you see here, if you are looking at the video here, you see here the phase 1 and phase 2 detoxification pathways depicted in the liver. And the liver is essentially the function of detoxification in the liver is to take fat-soluble toxins, things that we're exposed to in our environment, and break them down and to make them more water soluble so that they can flow out of our body. Again, through that bucket, through the emunctories in the bucket, the holes in the bucket, primarily our kidneys, bowels, lungs, and skin. So the liver is running all these pathways, and which require enzymes and nutrients to serve as cofactors. And you can see here, if you're looking at the video, or you can imagine that there are just tons of nutrients that are involved in these detoxification pathways. And some nutrients are better studied and better understood than others. But long story short, tons of vitamins, tons of minerals, and tons of phytonutrients support these liver detoxification processes. And it goes without saying that hydration is also key, because we are making those water-soluble byproducts that should be flowing through the body. So let's talk for a second, just the common sense kind of things that are going to support, quote unquote, liver health and detoxification. These are things that are rich in nutrients, so the B vitamins, all the vitamins, all the minerals, again, all the phytonutrients, things that are rich in nutrients. And these are whole plant foods. Whole plant foods are the most nutrient dense foods. And of course, each whole plant food has varying degrees of different unique phytonutrients and whatnot. But whole plant foods, fruits and vegetables specifically, are going to be most supportive of detoxification. And on that note, also whole plant foods contain fiber and water, which are supporting the process as well. Fiber and water go hand in hand because fiber is essentially supporting the cleansing of the bowels and the removal of toxicity through one of the primary emunctory pathways, which is the bowels. So fiber is super key in detoxification. And in order for that flushing to happen, again, we need water as well. So load yourself up with tons of vitamins, minerals, and phytonutrients. Load yourself up with fiber and water, and you're going to create the context for optimal cleansing, right? That's kind of the key here. So yes, fat-soluble toxins are becoming water-soluble through phase 1 and phase 2 detox enzymes, kind of like 2 phases of the washing machine, or a wash cycle and a rinse cycle or something like that. And loads of nutrients are required, and a clean and hydrated environment helps for sure. That being said, this is maybe a good place to plug one product. You probably know that I'm not a big fan of supplements. My goal is to primarily help people get off of supplements who think that they need them. And that being said, hopefully are familiar with Green Force, a product that I created, which is some people might call it a supplement, but I've actually, long story short, marketed as a nutrition product. So it has nutrition facts on the back because it's derived from whole food ingredients. But Green Force is super vitamin mineral rich, and it contains a super beneficial ingredient of broccoli sprout powder, which has sulforaphane, which is helpful in phase 2 detoxification. So just one sort of product to consider for optimal daily detox is Green Force. Of course, especially in the context of a naturally balanced and nourishing sort of life. All right, that's enough of our graphics here. I want to shift gears and talk about today's lesson of the week, which is relevant to this conversation of toxicity and detoxification. And this lesson is also brought to you by my daughter, Grace. Grace is a toddler, and she, like most toddlers, has had some illnesses and some rashes. And I want to talk about and I think when you're a parent, when your child is sick or has a rash or something like that, it can be really scary, right? Because we don't know what's going on. We can't really oftentimes hear, like, are you in pain? Are you okay? So there's a lot of fear generally associated especially when you're not understanding what's naturally taking place in the body. There can be a lot of fear for parents. So I want to normalize that fear, and I want to let you know that it's okay if you've been in that position with a child yourself. But that being said, this lesson is about Grace's natural healing of her eczema. And eczema is, of course, a super common skin condition. I believe that it is much more common for a child to experience some flare in eczema than not. More than 50%. I don't know what the actual statistic is, but more than 50% of children experience eczema at some point in their life. And that eczema can become chronic and also can lead to other chronic sort of symptoms as well, if that eczema is suppressed with steroids or other suppressive treatments. So in Grace's case, we treated her eczema with lots of natural skincare topicals. And frankly, I kind of let mom assess the eczema and kind of treat the eczema. And she was using like Manuka honey and all these kind of products. And it wasn't getting better. Like maybe her skin was soothed and she wasn't in, itching or in pain, or, it wasn't symptomatic in that sort of way, but it wasn't getting better. So finally, Dad kind of intervened, and I was like, all right, this isn't working. Let's get out of the way. Let's do nothing. And this can be really hard, especially, again, if there's fear or uncertainty. But I know how the body works. I knew that Grace's body was trying to express something. So knowing that, I was like, all right, let's get out of the way. Let's stop putting anything on her skin. And I would say within a week or two of doing nothing, Grace's skin was 95% better. And then soon after, 100% better. And to this day, maybe a year later, Grace is 100% eczema free. And it's so common, like I said, it's so common for that eczema to be suppressed in any number of ways, mainly topical steroids or something like that. And then that can so commonly lead to other allergies and asthma. That's known as the quote unquote atopic triad, which is so common: eczema, allergies, asthma. And it's just such a common state for children to be in our world today. And my understanding is that it all comes from suppressing things, because I don't know what the mysterious inner workings of a developing body is, but expression of stuff is part of that process. So we just have to trust the process. All right, that's the lesson of the week, brought to you by Grace once again. And now let's talk about your emunctories, because we talked about the liver, the things that are required to support liver detoxification pathways. And now I want to talk about the excretion of toxins from your body. So liver is breaking down stuff, and the emunctories excrete stuff. And the primary way that things leave your body is through your bowels. And we already talked about the requirement for hydration and fiber to keep things moving through the bowels. It's super common for people to think about cleansing or detoxing in like a fast or a juice fast. And that can be super effective in terms of like mobilizing toxins and allowing your body to break down toxins. But oftentimes, especially if people's bowel or intestinal health is not optimal, that can then lead to the reabsorption of toxins and actually a lot of side effects from that. So we want to keep the bowels moving. And the best way we can do that is by eating nutrient dense, fiber rich, whole plant foods and staying optimally hydrated. So I like to think about fiber as kind of like a toxin shuttle. So the liver is breaking down things, and we didn't talk about the anatomy of the liver and the hepatic portal vein and all of these incredible ways that you're designed to, first of all, keep toxins out of general circulation, but then put toxins back into the liver or put toxins back into the bowels so that they can be ultimately flushed down the toilet. So pooping regularly and increasing your bowel transit time and bowel health in general is super supportive. And maintaining and increasing fiber content and hydration content, super supportive. And this can be done, practically. Some foods that are great for this are flax seeds, chia seeds, leafy greens, and in general, whole plant foods. So let's talk now about kidneys, another good, important emunctory organ. Kidneys are filtering and excuse me, I'm blabbering and I'm making myself dry mouth over here. But kidneys are filtering and excreting some water soluble toxins as well. It's kind of one of the backup emunctories, primary one being your bowels. But that being said, we need to maintain mineral balance in the body. And we need to maintain optimal hydration status so that your kidneys can be in that optimal environment. And another important thing for optimal kidney filtration is the alkalinity balance in your body. And man, I'm realizing that each one of these things is such a rabbit hole in and of itself. But long story short, when we think about maintaining alkalinity in the body, again, it's kind of this myth that we can shift the alkalinity, but we can push our buffering systems more towards the alkaline process or alkaline side of things. And that can be done through, again, whole plant foods, leafy greens, these sorts of things. What else should I say? Also, in terms of maintaining optimal mineral balance in the body, hydrating with mineral rich sources of hydration like spring water, coconut water, fresh juices, super helpful for kidney health and mineral balance in the body. And also, if you're just drinking purified water, adding some trace mineral drops to your water can also help optimal kidney filtration. Another big part of the emunctory excretion process, which is technically not an emunctory, but part of the process nonetheless, and that is your lymphatic system. All of your cells are creating waste in your body, even under normal, healthy circumstances. And your lymphatic system is kind of like the sewage system of the body. So it's cleaning up that waste and then putting it back into our general circulation to be run through the liver. We also have these lymph nodes that kind of clean up the process along the way. But long story short, in order for lymphatic health to be maintained, hydration status is also super important and necessary, and also physical movement, walking, bouncing, the classic lymphatic exercises, rebounding, using gravitational forces to like shift things and keep things moving in your body, super helpful. The biggest emunctory organ in your body is your skin. And that's not to say that it's the primary emunctory, but it's the biggest organ of this in the body. And things are coming out of your skin constantly. And that being said, things should be coming out of your skin rather than being absorbed by your skin. It's so common for people to lather themselves with lotions and sunscreens and all of these things, which they are sold as good or beneficial or skin health promoting, but can have systemic toxicity effects because we're absorbing things through our skin, or we can be. So we should be sweating daily. And of course, ways to sweat include being physically active outside and also doing, some saunaing. or that sort of thing to increase your body temperature so that you sweat. So my rule of thumb is to try and sweat every day, at least once. Usually I like to sweat twice. I like to sweat in the sauna and sweat through physical activity. So skin health, super important and related to detoxification. And finally, the last emunctory is are the lungs, and we're breathing stuff out. Again, we should be breathing out more toxicity than we are breathing in, and back to cleaning up the environment and avoiding toxin accumulation. But when it comes to breath and detoxification, it's helpful to know that our lungs have an incredible capacity of 6 liters. That's kind of our total lung capacity. However, if we're just kind of sitting around at rest, most people are using about a half of a liter, so about 1/12 of their total lung capacity. So that's why breath work can be super important to increase the volume of air that we're moving, so that, I kind of envision, if at the base of our lungs, there can be some stagnant air that kind of just hangs out and gets stuck there if we're not ventilating with the full lung capacity. So using our diaphragm to really get to the base of our lungs so that we're moving more air than just that top 1/12 of our lung capacity, can be really helpful in the detoxification process. And that will lead, as we'll talk about next week, into the process of regulating our nervous systems to support detoxification, because parasympathetic, sympathetic balance, super important when it comes to managing optimal detox in your body. All right, now wrapping things up, I want to kind of rapid fire some practical steps for optimizing detoxification, and really do so in a way that's simple and clear, because I think a lot of people just overthink and overcomplicate these things and think like, oh yeah, I need this ingredient in order to detox, I need that ingredient. But really what your body needs is nutrients and water. Back to that picture of the liver here. Nutrients and water, tons of nutrients, vitamins, minerals, and phytonutrients, and tons of good cellular hydrating water. So mineral-rich water and vitamin, mineral, and phytonutrient-rich foods. It's really that simple. So think real food and real hydration sources, and also fruits and vegetables, especially like oranges and melons, and a lot of fruits in addition to like cucumbers and celery. These are great because they are giving your body real minerals, real phytonutrients, real vitamins, but also the optimal water to cleanse your body, because it's the perfect cellular balance for cellular hydration, so that you're really getting that water in there so to shuttle stuff out. So that's kind of what's taking place. Doesn't need to be more complicated than that. And that being said, this is where the Alter Health Cleanse comes in, because it focuses on just that: nutrient density and optimal cellular hydration. And it does so in a way that there's 5 phases to the Alter Health Cleanse. So it kind of guides your body into the peak detoxification status, and then gently guides your body out of that peak detoxification status. So it can be a little bit of a shock to the system if you just like throw your body, depending on where you're at, right? But if you just throw your body into a cleanse or a detox and you just strip out all the junk and just flood your body with nutrients, that can be helpful, but there might likely be some side effects associated with that. So our intention is to be more gentle and also more sustainable, because this is not just some like crash course and then you go back to your unhealthy, toxic lifestyle. And I know if I'm talking to you, if you're on the other side of this, you're already, light years ahead of the general population in terms of how you're living. So really, this is kind of just a reset and a flood in your body. And I like to do this, honestly, 4 times a year. And we have been doing this 4 times a year for the last 6+ years through Alter Health. So if you want to learn more about that guided cleanse, which again is our last Alter Health Cleanse that we'll be offering, you can go to www.alter.health/cleanse. Now, before we sign off for today, I want to talk about our challenge of the week. And this one is related to cleansing as well. Your challenge is to take a look at your lifestyle. take a look at your food, your air, your water, your connection with nature, and pick one place where you can mitigate some toxins. Maybe you just opened up under the sink and you found like, oh my gosh, I've been using this to clean my countertops, and there's some crazy chemical that might be like not the best to be breathing in. So, you know, just audit your physical environment and pick one thing. I think this can be super overwhelming for people. And again, my intention is to not provoke any sort of stressful, overwhelmed thinking, but just help you to have more knowledge and awareness of your environment so that you can optimize it in a way that's going to be supporting you and creating the environment in your body so that your body can function at its peak performance. So, just to recap, this is just the physical conversation as it pertains to detoxification. And again, I kind of just scratched the surface with a lot of these things, but I need not go any deeper. You got the gist. Nutrients and hydration is where it's at. Don't overthink it. Don't overcomplicate it. But knowledge is power. So the more you understand, the more you are empowered in your actions. That's at least my experience. So if this message resonates, if you want to learn more, join us in the Ultra Health Cleanse. And also, if you feel like you know someone in your life who's always going from cleanse to cleanse, detox to detox, but not really feeling any better, maybe you can point them this way so that they can support their body in a way that's not insane and not stressful and not extreme. Also, on that note, like I didn't provide a lot of details about the cleanse, so if I told you like what it involved in terms of nutritionally, but if you want to learn more about all the details of what's involved in terms of practically, head over to www.alter.health/cleanse. And again, it's just $49. So until next time, I look forward to touching base and going deeper in this cleanse conversation next week. But until then, keep thriving.